Well, welcome to another Faith Horizons podcast. Today I'm here with Michael Miller, and Michael and I are just kind of venturing out together. We're both Kansas City natives, right?
Yeah, we are born and raised.
Born and raised.
Don't
Kansas
meet many
City,
of those around here now.
Kansas City natives, from different sides of the town. I've lived all over the Kansas City metro, but different sides of the town, and so we just kind of wanted to delve into. I have a passion for Kansas City. Do you?
I love Kansas City.
Love Kansas City. We love Kansas City, and we both want to see the best for Kansas City. And so one of the things that we're going to get into Michael's story here. Just kind of get to meet him and then get to know him. But one of the things that's recently just kind of popped up on the headlines of Kansas City, especially after the Chiefs celebration parade, was this homicide issue, just this ongoing homicide issue, which paints a very dark picture over Kansas City on a day of what was supposed to be a day of celebration, right?
Yes.
And one person, died on that day.
Plenty were injured. Yeah.
There was plenty were injured, but only one person died. But according to the Kansas City Star, the 2023 was the deadliest year recorded in Kansas City's history, with over 184 homicides in Kansas City. And this is just people being shot, people being killed for whatever reason. And everybody has a different solution for this problem. Do this. But Michael and I kind of wanted to talk about. We wanted to talk about family, and so today that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about family because I've got another page here which we'll bring up later. That just talks about family is a root issue here. It is,
and so there's a lot of ideas around family, and a lot of people have these models, right? Like some people think there's this model that maybe the mom and the grandma can do the same job as a nuclear family. You know what I mean? Like the mom and the dad and these different forms of family. I find that we have experienced the most success with the mom and the father still in the house together raising the kids. I think everybody kind of knows that, but that's usually a talking point where people nowadays like to fight back on.
Yeah.
But there's really no studies or no research showing that any different form of a family structure outside of a nuclear family is producing the same results long term. So those are some studies I'd love to see if there are some different forms of family or different ideas around a family structure that doesn't involve a nuclear family that has had longevity, or any longitudinal studies that, actually prove that these different models work. I don't think they do. I think they're good talking points and maybe, a stunning conversation in some kind of political battle, but I don't see it really working.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's this natural thing that happens between the mother and the father, to where the mother brings the nurture and the father can bring a little more of law and order, but to a point where kids start to value the law and the order and the discipline, and the structure is really what it is, because structure actually is good for everybody. It's good for us on a personal level, and it's good for us on a societal level. So I share this story a lot because my wife is the very nurturing, empathetic one, right? Our kids fall off the bike and she's like rushing to go and comfort them and give them a hug. Right. And they need that. And I'll let them
Everybody needs that.
And I'll let her do that if I see that the bike fall was a major crash. But if they get up or if they fall and then they look at me, I'm like, no, you got it. Get back up. Like, it's the eye-to-eye contact, and I can kind of judge the crash.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to always just kind of fall out at the first sign of trouble. Yeah. But she kind of gives the nurturing, oh, baby, it's okay. But I kind of give the push, get back on the bike. Let's keep going. Like, this is how you learn to ride a bike.
Yeah.
And it's a rough process for 2 weeks. And my experience is a little different than yours because I'm on the east side, and there's not a whole lot of space to train kids to ride bikes, right? So I have to kind of be
a little different.
I had to be a little old school and kind of look left and right, let them ride up and down the street and call out cars as quick as I could, right? Not ideal, but I made the best with what I had and training them for that. But it was that structure and that discipline and kind of creating that safe space for them to grow.
Great point, though. The great point is that that your wife provides this nurturing aspect, but then the father figure, right? The father figure provides this, hey, you can do it, get up, go. You know what I mean? It's a more of a challenge to the child, right? The child needs the challenge of the father. Hey, you can do that. I trained both my kids to ride their bikes. I think if I hadn't been around our kids, and one of my children's in the room right now, my daughter Anna, I don't know if they'd be riding bikes now. I don't know if certain moms can help your children develop this way.
Right.
You have to let the child have accidents, have problems, fall on their face. You know what I mean?
Because the mom is going to be so absorbed with like, oh no, they could get hurt, right? And they're going to want to rush to their aid. And that's fine. They want to protect.
But that's part of it. But part of life is also, pain is actually helpful. Don't do that again.
It is.
It's very helpful. So.
And I do think there is a beautiful dynamic between a mother and a father where they both kind of can understand the pain works, but we have to facilitate this in a way that, it's not going to be crucial or set our family back. Yeah. So there's certain things that me and my family will do that we love doing together. We'll go on bike rides, trail rides.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But climbing mountains, like my wife thinks that's so fun because back in Wisconsin, there's so many things to do. Yeah. That's her hometown. But she likes to climb these little clefts, right? But there's always... So this is where my protector mode kind of comes out more, and I guess this is more my empathy because I think, especially like it gets darker. Yeah. There's all kind of snakes and little things that can come out of nowhere, right? And I start thinking that. And then my wife will go into a story about how she was climbing up those as a young kid, and she did get bit by a snake. And I was like, probably not the greatest idea for our kids right now, right? And so there's different things that are very dangerous, and we can kind of it's interchangeable when we want to be protective and a little more challenging and issuing those challenges.
Well, men are the protectors, and so like we allow for a certain amount of risk,
to a degree,
that's helpful. There's a helpful level of risk, and then there's the level where you shouldn't go past this level, at least at this stage of your life.
Correct. But the family structure is crucial, and so I don't know where you spent most of your time as far as Kansas City, but most of my growing up has been on the east side, and more southern east, like southeast.
So I grew up I was in Lee Summit, I was in Belton, Grandview. We were in Wyandotte. I was in Wyandotte for a long time. I moved for a short stint down on 5th and Grand. There's like a storefront. I lived in that with a friend of mine for a while, and then we moved to Overland. I moved to Overland Park and then back to Kansas City once I met my wife.
Gotcha.
Back to Kansas City, Missouri, and South Kansas City right now. So that's kind of been my trail I've taken. But you said you've lived mostly on the east side.
Yeah, right? So mostly on the east side and South Kansas City area. So in Lee Summit, Overland Park, even South Kansas City, you're going to see more of that nuclear structure. You're going to see more of the mom and dad, and usually greater success rates throughout the longevity of somebody's life. What I've noticed, though, on the east side, it almost goes without question, and it's so normal to have a single parent or a single mom. Or the dad only comes around every so often, on the weekends. And then sooner or later, that may even die off. And so what I've noticed is men and women are my peers who are stable and usually have a little more long-term success, in interdependent relationships, marriages, things of that sort, do come from a mother-father background, right? And I do notice that even I kind of struggle at times to value it. And I have to constantly kind of submit to constant daily renewal of the mind. Yeah. And, my faith comes into that part. But what I realize is it's so normal now for people to kind of put themselves first. And in most family structures, there is this reliance to put the family first. Yeah. And I think that's what we miss when we lose the nuclear family, when we lose the mom and the dad. And we just kind of get maybe the single parent. And there's a lot of people out there that try to make arguments for one or the other, like children do better from a single father than a single mother. Neither here nor there. There's still elements of both to where together is better.
Because you're missing elements of the other one then, because normally women are nurturing and normally men are more, less risk adverse, so which is good.
It is.
But they're both needed. This is a partnership to raise a child.
It is. Yeah. It is. And so I've never felt to, and this is anecdotal, and I'm pretty sure I think the stats are out there. Anybody could probably look it up. But there is nothing like that dynamic, like the yin and the yang of that nuclear structure of having the mom and the father. And there's a little I'm going to be a little goofy here. There's a little TikTok my daughter showed me a long time ago where it's like a 4-year-old son is pushing back really hard on the mom because he doesn't feel like going to bed. And then the mom calls the dad, and the dad just starts walking in. The minute he says, get in the bed, all of a sudden the temper tantrum goes away and the son just lays down. And I was like, that's a very good working relationship within a nuclear family, right?
Yeah.
If that was a single mom, that struggle may have happened for an hour.
Yeah.
And then that struggle may have, just lingered into something the next day because now the mom's tired. The mom didn't get enough sleep because she's stressed out, and that may play out in her work performance. You see what I'm saying? So.
Well, also, then the child, in those situations might win.
Negative reinforcement, yes.
Yeah, and so that doesn't help. You know what I mean?
No.
So then they expect to win next time. So next time struggles harder.
Yes, it is.
So anyway, yeah. So that's a big deal. So I did a little bit of. I pulled a talking about statistics. I pulled a report here from the Maripedia.org effects of family structure on crime.
Nate did his homework. Look at him.
I did. I was trying to be ready for this, but I'm like, you know what? We've got all this homicide and stuff, and we're going to talk about the family, and we think that family is a root issue and stuff like that. But anyway, and they said over the past 50 years, the rise of violent crime parallels the rise in families abandoned by fathers. High crime neighborhoods are characterized by high concentrations of families abandoned by fathers. And so you're talking about fathers here,
You are.
And you're the father of your family, and so you're critical to your children because they need that, I want to just kind of dive into, a little bit of your backstory. And it seems like you've come from the other side. I grew up, I have a nuclear family. I got a mom and a dad, they've been married for over 35 years now. So I have had that. That's an advantage. It really is an advantage. But then, you grew up in a little different situation.
Yeah. So it's so funny you brought that up because there is a progressive pattern.
Yeah.
So, anybody who studied child development understands this progressive pattern, right? So the nuclear family, as far as the psychological structure, like the mom and the dad and the balance between, the challenging protector who is facilitating dangerous learning experiments like riding a bike or learning karate
or driving a car,
any of those things, right? And then you have the empathy of the mother, the nurturer, the one who wants you to understand that, that was hard and your dad was a little hard on you there, but you need to understand where it's coming from, yada, 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 right?
Yeah.
And that plays out throughout life. But there is a stage after, the psychological balance between the mom and the dad raising them in, grade school age. There is this teenage year where it's a little different, and it's a very different structure when you don't have the nuclear family.
Yeah.
Because now you have a single parent. Whether you like it or not, capitalism, the cost of goods, all that demands that you produce more, which means you probably have to work more, which means the family takes a back seat, which means if you have to carry that burden on your own, especially as a single family or a single parent, now your kids are kind of left to the community. They're kind of left to the schools.
So the community raises them in effect.
It does. But then there's also this barrier where the mom or the dad can't be there and is as engaged as they would like to be.
Yeah.
So my experience, and I think there's probably some studies out there that could bear this out, that in my young teenage to mid-teenage years, I did rely more on my teens or my peers in my teenage years to kind of mirror back to me my image and what I should be doing.
Oh, okay.
And so as you start, and I think that's throughout socioeconomic statuses, no matter where you're at. I think everybody does that as teenagers. Mm-hmm. They start to rely on their peer groups for more feedback and more identity formation, which can be dangerous if you never had that identity kind of rooted and grounded in you with your parents in childhood and more the formidable years. So you could very well end up as a teenager being formed by groups negatively, and it could cost you very, very much throughout life if it doesn't get changed. So on the east side, the way it played out most of the time is, there's young boys, it's a lot of testosterone. And so the way we used to filter that out, especially in our communities and mainly black communities, used to be so many youth programs. Yeah. You used to be able to go to the Greg Kleist Center. They still have that at the Greg Kleist Center. But we need more programs like the Greg Clay Center where Chris is teaching boxing.
Yeah.
These kids can come and learn boxing, and if they actually got a conflict going on, well, let's see who's got the better hands. Show me your hand speed, right? And it's there, right? It stops there.
Yeah.
Or there used to be football programs. There used to be all these outlets for the youth, right? Not so much anymore. They're gone. I don't know what happened to the funding for those, but we need more of those. We need more funding for your Boys and Girls Club, for your YMCA, so where these kids can go and have these healthy outlets for solving conflict management, right? So that's one thing to help peers. But if you don't have that and all you have is, let's just say you got the OG on the block who's always there when you get out of school. He's been in and out of prison, and he seems like the man. Nobody messes with him. He comes out in his wife beater and his do-rag, and he raises his voice, and people kind of like that. He's got his pit bulls going. He's got the nice car.
Yeah.
But you don't know what comes with that life, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to maybe Lee Summit, Overland Park.
What do you mean by OG? I'm totally oblivious here. You just used a word, something
Okay,
that I
so
don't understand.
in the black community, when we say OG, it's usually somebody that we hold in high respect and lived a long life of dominance or respect, or they've lived their life. They've done their thing.
Yeah.
And so, and usually though, the original term is original gangster. Somebody who's lived that gang style, that gang life. They're about that.
You don't want to mess with them.
They're not the ones.
You respect it. You respect these people.
I use it now more as in terms of reverence, because I think it takes a lot to get in your 50s and 60s and 70s and still be healthy, still doing it right, still loving the same woman, still engaged with your kids, still holding the job, right? You take that for granted when you're in your 20s and 30s. So when I say it, I use it more in reverence, but the original term means that. So back on track, what I'm saying is you have these things that happen as teenagers, but your community and your social environment could be so much different, and it can mold that so differently.
Yeah.
So on the east side, it's molded. And this is not some goofy, I'm a sellout conservative talking point, but the value system is more like stand up for yourself, fight, don't let nobody disrespect you, stand on business, these kind of things. And those things are great. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But the problem is when there's no family culture there to filter through the negative part of it, when that's, all that is consuming your mind day in and day out. Like I remember, I can't speak for everybody, but when I was a teenager, I don't think I listened to any other form of music than hip hop. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong, there was days where I liked my Red Hot Chili Peppers and things like that, but I hid that from my friend groups. Like, they can't see me over here listening to this white guy with no shirt on.
So you grew up though in a single parent household though, right?
Pretty much.
Just tell us a little bit about that, because we're trying to
single parent household.
Yeah.
There's, again, it goes back to the point that I stated. There is no buffering for the aspect of the community and the societal influence. Because when I come home, mom's not there.
So that's why you said that's why you look to your peers to kind of help you identify yourself, right?
You do.
Yeah.
And then, but even in Johnson County, Lee Summit, they'll still look to their peers, but they can still have that healthy feedback and a healthy sounding board in mom and dad. One of them will be present when they get home.
And it's not, I wouldn't say it's always safe, but it's there.
It's there, right? And then there's weekend activities. And I'm not saying people in Johnson County, Lee Summit, don't have struggles, but I am saying the alternative could be there to get a healthier sounding board or healthier feedback, as opposed to a single mom in the inner city on the east side or any urban core, any urban environment. So with me, when I came home, there's no mom there. She's working. She went to her second job.
Okay.
Right? And most people understand that if there's a single parent, there's nobody there when you get home.
So talk to us just a little bit about the A and B trauma that you were mentioning, because I thought that was a really good point,
So again, what kind of goes along with the single parent lifestyle without a nuclear family is this thing where I kind of call myself like a trauma baby. And what I mean by that is there's two types of trauma. Okay. Right? In psychological terms, there can be type A trauma and type B trauma.
Right.
Now, your type A trauma is your severe neglect or abandonment. Yeah. Like you end up in the foster care system, nobody's there at all, or somebody's there, but they're so checked out, they might as well not be there.
And so there's different stages of severity on the A trauma, right?
It could be,
like
but
foster care is complete abandonment, an orphan, stuff like that, right?
And somebody might step in to take the place, but I don't want to get in the foster care system. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, but it's super broken right now. But there's people trying to do good work. Yeah. Whatever the case is, it varies between the neglect. Yeah. And then, so my form of neglect there was kind of just like, even though I had a single mom and she did the best she could, she still had, addiction problems.
Yeah.
So trying to stay sober was a whole nother battle. And if she was engaged, it was very minimal engagement. It was just kind of half-hearted, kind of engagement.
Okay.
And then you got the type B trauma, and that's like where isolated incidents happen to you. So somebody abused you, somebody struck you in the face, somebody was supposed to protect you misused you, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to get too graphic with the kind
No.
of trauma you could have, but it can be an isolated event, but it can be an isolated event that happens over and over again. But it's something that happens to you almost in like a blunt force trauma, like it happens.
So like there's a physical element to it.
There's a physical element to it, or there is a damaging element to it that an event took place. So a type B trauma can be, we leave here, one of us gets into an accident, right?
So there's an action taken.
Normally.
There's an action taken. Like,
Normally.
Versus neglect where there's
Nothing
happened.
and the problem with type A trauma is it makes you think something's wrong with you. Because that's the part that makes you think you're crazy. There's something wrong with me. Am I tripping? Like, why am I not getting something back?
So we have different levels of living, but I have struggled with type A trauma, too, but that would be the trauma that I've had to overcome myself. You know what I mean? We have different levels of this, that's what we're talking about. There's different levels of this, but there are two different types of traumas primarily.
And so what you'll see though with single parent families is there's going to be all kinds of trauma. I'm not going to say, I don't want to poo-poo type B.
Yeah.
But what you're going to see a lot is type A. And
especially
that can
in a single family. Yeah.
Especially in single family, and especially if there's poverty.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's all kind of other barriers you can add in. You can add, like I said, addiction, and then you can add poverty. But what I saw mainly was I did want to get a good reflection back from my peers.
Uh-huh.
And there's nothing wrong with that to a degree. But what you see if you got a single parent family and then you add in type A trauma and then you add in poverty and you add in the need and necessity to produce for that single parent, all those things create barriers to which the kid is even further neglected and doesn't get anything they need. And so it's almost as if a single parent can work in the right community and environment and a right situation. So if you're a single parent and you kind of buffer that with your faith community and you buffer that in a good community or a good school district,
right,
chances are you got better chances. Still not ideal.
So how does all of this, this neglect and all this stuff, how does this lead, to a crime? How does it lead to this? Because we basically have neglect, right, that's happening here. And so then these teenagers or these young people, 10, 12 years old are all looking to their peers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't know. I can't really speak for these young guys now, the young teenagers now.
Yeah.
But I know these young teenagers now, they're just wild. There's no reference. There's nothing.
Right.
Like, anybody can get it.
Yeah.
That's what I don't get. But as a younger teenager, what I remember was, who was like my main influences, like whatever we were getting from our neighborhoods, our communities, like I said, the OGs. If they stand on business, that means don't let anybody disrespect you. So the idea of hypermasculinity becomes you have to be quick and ready to fight at any given moment, and you must be ready to take it to the next level before the next guy will. Okay. Hence why you will get somebody who's like, yeah, we used to be able to just handle it, with boxing gloves. But then what if somebody not only insult you, but then you find out they got better hand speed than you? They're actually a better boxer than you too.
Yeah.
Right? How do you go home and tell your family that or tell the people on the block that, right? And so a lot of the influence was there was no real positive role models. Yeah. I mean, these are talking points people always say, but they're real. I mean, we didn't have the Cosby Show anymore. I mean, and look at Cosby now. But it's one of those things like there's no healthy
role model.
None. And the role models you do got, where are we getting them from? We're getting them from entertainment. We're getting them from The Sopranos. We're getting them from hip-hop culture, hip-hop, where most of these artists will promote a lifestyle that none of them have ever done.
Right.
But who cares, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where you get the crime and violence, because it's almost like this hyper masculinity where I'm going to get you, I'm going to get my payback or my look back one way or the other, which does breed over time. And by the time you get to become a teenager, it's like, well, I ain't going to let him disrespect me. I remember getting firearms really young. I mean, my first firearm, I think I was like 16.
Yeah.
It was a 357 Smith & Wesson, long nose, revolver, right? And I sold that, and I just started getting into that, right? That was what I got into. Grace of God, I never actually used it. I would just sell it to people, right?
Right.
But that was the part of, I want people to know that I have that capability to protect myself.
So that brings up a good point, and it really is kind of, you and I, we really like talking about economy, because I think so that's another major issue, because you're talking about you're talking about the family structure here, but you're also talking about poverty. Well, poverty is the lack of economy, right? It's a lack of healthy economy, right? So with the lack of healthy economy, like you just said, when you're 16 years old, you got a gun, you sold the gun, right? Well, what does that do? That creates economy.
It does.
See? And so we're getting into an economy that's not necessarily, it's not the right type of economy for a 16-year-old to be getting into, right? No. So that's what I'm saying. And so the availability of economy on the, in the neighborhood that you were in was that, whether that's drugs or whatever, whatever the economy is, that's what's available, and that's a serious. So then once this person's already, like you're saying, once they've already participated a little bit, then you can get really sucked into that.
You can get really sucked into it. And again, as a teenager,
by the grace of God, man.
And you start getting this reflection from other people, and I'm like, whoa, before you know it, it's like, this is not really who I am. Like, I actually kind of enjoy having debates about, psychology. Like, why am I selling this thing? Why am I portraying this image? Because you're getting respect. You're getting things that you're not getting normally without that lifestyle.
And money is sometimes a reflection of respect too.
It really is.
When people give you
can take people to the mall
or whatever for something, and you're like, I got $300 now. I can go to the movies. I can take my girl out. You know what I mean?
That's exactly what it was. And so back in my day,
Just saying.
the bus line transportation was huge and better. Free transportation, or $1 to get somewhere, was great, because back then we also had the Bannister Mall, right? And that was on every major bus.
Mall. You talked about that, yeah.
And I mean, that would get you from the inner city out to,
So
Wonderland.
What neighborhoods exactly did you live? I mean, what streets were you in when you were growing up? You said the southeast.
So earlier teenage years, I was in more like off of 39th Street, 39th and Elmwood, your Indianas,
and this is
those areas.
20 years ago, 15 years ago?
Yes, roughly.
So it's a little different.
I don't want to age myself that much, but it was, let's just say 2 decades plus. I'm not going any higher than that.
Right.
But people, once I say the Bannister Mall, can probably, the Bannister Mall was thriving, right?
Yeah.
All kind of shopping centers.
Right.
I mean, they used to sell cassette tapes, right? And if I got $20, I was going to get that new No Limit Mystical tape, right? I'd listen to that over and over again. Anyway, but those were the areas I was in.
So you were in 39th, and then where else were you at?
And so also migrated out south further to Raytown.
Oh, okay.
It's like Raytown South. And Raytown, it seemed like, you were kind of getting out of the inner city. Like, not really. You're just getting in nicer houses, but it was the same kind of element. It was the same kind of kids.
Right, because there's like those little,
still the same broken family structures.
Those little hooks are all over those.
They're all over the places, but single moms could do better out there. They can get better housing. But then I did get exposed to more nuclear families, more family structures that were healthier.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's when it started to buffer the negative things. And
so did your mom decide to move to Raytown then? Or how did that happen?
Long story short, my mom just really didn't have the capacity to raise me anymore. Okay. So I had to start staying with family and friends.
Okay, so you moved in with other family and friends, and they were healthy family and friends.
They were.
See, that's a big deal.
That is. And it combats that, but
yeah. I mean,
at a later date.
You're still missing a lot.
A whole lot. But at a later date, we can talk about this. But it does create this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Because
we can talk about that later.
Yeah, there's this times where it's like, yes, I want to be this awesome, loving Christian man. Then there's this other part of me that's like, man, Tupac was the dude. Like, I want to imitate that, right?
Yeah, right.
And it's just that dichotomy that's constantly within an individual. Anyway, back to what you were saying about the economy. Like having money, being able to take your girlfriend to the mall, meet her there after you got off the bus line in your brand new Timbs, and you can go to the Buckle and get all these clothes.
Right.
You do whatever. And then you're also getting this feedback of everybody like, oh, that's Mike Miller. Oh, that's him, right?
Yeah.
All the while you're not knowing man, you're kind of on a trajectory to where this is going to be short-lived.
Yeah, that's that. So yeah, we're talking about like this is the propensity towards something that's fairly negative. You know?
It is.
Yeah.
But at the time, you're selling your soul for a bowl of soup. You don't really know that though, right? And you don't know that without getting the experience or coming back. Let's circle all the way back around. A mom and dad who can give that healthy guidance. Now, I'm not saying a nuclear family is always going to buffer against tragedy, always going to go buffer against teenage pregnancy, always going to buffer against somebody going to prison. Mm-hmm. That's not what I'm saying. I think personally, without the stats, my own anecdotal evidence, you have a better chance if you have that.
Yeah, teenage pregnancy, I mean.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
And that's throughout. But
yeah.
it impacts urban cores, black communities, more so than other communities, I think.
Yeah, the urban core, the people that are already living at a poverty level.
Yes.
When you add another obstacle to overcome, all the other obstacles are still there, but now you have another one.
You do. So I think what I was trying to intimate is the idea that the nuclear family can help, and it is the greatest success, or the greatest tool of success that we have for child rearing.
And you were talking about that as a foundation.
That's the foundation. Yeah. So I've really been getting into development more, and can't really do much without a solid foundation.
Yeah.
Like you might be able to give it a temporary fix. Most renovations are 5 to 7 year fix, right? Like say a big beautiful house get fixed. 5 to 7 years, you're going to have to do it all over again.
Yeah.
Especially if you got a bad foundation. Same way you got to look at raising a human being, right? A solid foundation that we know in America has been the nuclear family.
And we even talked about that as a Bible. There's a Bible verse that goes with it. Build your house upon the rock.
This rock, right? Not sand, not anything else. Upon this rock, and it will stand, right? And there are so many things about that Bible verse that if you build a house right, like I think about it, like even my lovely daughter, like so stinking cute, but as she ages, she just gets cuter and cuter to the point where like this is getting she's starting to attract the wrong kind of attention. I don't think I like this anymore, right? Yeah. And that's kind of how the Lord wants to build the family, or wants to build a human being, or build his community. Like it gets better and better, right? And when you have that solid foundation. Unfortunately, I just don't see a solid foundation being built off of one person in a family setting.
No, it's difficult.
It is. It is.
So how did you get out of that? Because you were kind of on a trajectory there, and you said, did you get out of it when you were in Raytown? Then the trajectory you were on? Or?
I kind of relapsed in Raytown and just kind of circled back around again. Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. I have weeks where I'd be on fire for God and go to these youth programs. Yeah. Then I have weeks where I wanted to act like a total hoodlum.
Well, I'm talking about when you were messing with that the economy that was negative. Did you get out of that once you got to Raytown? Did that kind of help you get out of that? Or
Raytown kind of made it worse. Okay. I got out of that by my own choice, honestly, but it was I had a lot of Christian influence. I had a lady named Marcia who would pick me up and take me to youth Bible studies once a week.
But it is a negative economy that produces a real value.
It does.
And it does produce like respect. And so that's
for every one person that gets the real long-term value, you probably have, and I might be exaggerating here, you're probably going to have 200 to 300 people who get the negative.
That's what I'm. Yeah. So it does have negative consequences fairly quickly.
So for every successful rapper or athlete you see, and I'm not saying they all go down this dark trajectory of prison and drugs or stuff, but for every one of those you see, you're going to see 200 to 300 more people who don't succeed at playing ball, who don't succeed at rapping and glorifying that culture. They end up losing their families. They end up never being stable for their kids. They end up in and out of prison. They end up strung out on drugs because they just want to feel something, because it all goes back to that child rearing when you're a kid, when you never got that nurturing aspect of being loved and told it's okay. And that sounds like, don't be a softie, but it's really that. That's why the nuclear family's needed.
That's a good point. You bring up the sports element to this, because when you're growing up and you're a kid, who are your superstars, Mm-hmm. Your superstars are, Patrick Mahomes or Hill's phenomenal.
For me and you, it was Derek Thomas. It was Neil. You know what I mean? It was these guys. We never had a really good quarterback, so we had to lean on the defense.
But what I'm saying is these men grown men who are making millions of dollars in the sports industry. You know what I mean? Are they had to make it through high school. they had to go, they went to college, you know what I mean? They made it through that, you know what I mean? So, but we're losing, what I'm saying is we're losing them in the 12 to 18 range, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if they can't make it through 12 to 18, well, they're never going to get on no NFL contracts when
They're not.
And like you're saying, 1 in 200 maybe.
But here's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
They don't all need to get NFL contracts.
No, that's what I'm saying.
That NFL, just the youth the youth outlet.
Yeah.
Being able to perform and compete
Right.
and get out that aggression in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Go light somebody up in an Oklahoma drill.
Right.
Go, just flex on somebody, scream in their face after you dunk on them. Getting those out in those healthy ways, right? Even if you never get an NFL contract, well, what if you go to the right college and you join the right fraternity and you get the right access?
What I'm trying to say is that they're going to face probably reject from the NFL. 1 out of 300 will, right?
Most of them aren't going to.
1 out of 1,000, right? So they have to overcome that rejection. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so like maybe the goal is to go to the NFL, but what's your second, third, and fourth option?
And again. What a youth program gives you is so many other options. So yes, you are going to face that rejection,
or you might be successful that route. You might not, but
people can do their studies on those sports things, and
you
might not ever get Patrick Mahomes money. But then again, you might not totally wash out. You might spend a lot of time trying to make a team, end up on practice squads, yada yada yada. But it opens up so many doors. Yeah. But again, you can't value that if you don't have the right structure or support system, which usually is promoted greater and better by a nuclear family or by a super engaged grandma, But even then, it's kind of single family thing. Yeah. It's grandma taking the place of mom and dad who weren't there, couldn't cut.
So, but education, even though, God, education doesn't necessarily make you money. But
it's the networking. I didn't value that. I wish I would have valued that.
Networking, but it's also the ability to understand what is being communicated so that you can make the correct choices. You know what I mean? So
I love that.
Because for instance, according to the National Assessment of Adult Literacy, 2/3 of those who cannot read by proficiency by the end of the 4th grade will end up in jail or on welfare. And that's just seen statistically across the board that if you can't read by the end of the 4th grade, that you're going to end up in jail. You're statistically going to end up in jail or on welfare, right? But that's because you can't navigate the current system, because people are telling you, hey, don't do that or you're going to have a problem. You know what I mean? And so I'm just trying to say the education does matter here to help people be able to correctly navigate our systems.
Yep. And then the lack of the education. And then, my wife and I, when we're doing the Empire Dreams thing and we go into these communities and we meet people who have dreams and they want to be entrepreneurs, and, we start working with them and in 3 to 6 months we realize, okay, they don't know how to read. Or they have dyslexia, all right? And it's so damaging to their psychology, like when they have to disclose that. And there's so many times where somebody will look at me and they're almost expecting me to be like shocked that they can't read and in shock that they're struggling to comprehend what I'm communicating. And it's just that stigma of it to where it requires loving understanding. And you got to help them through that. Yeah. And there's no greater win than when they get their GED and they realize, oh, I just have to take my time and work at it. But how many people are going to really sit there and have the patience and the love to remediate adults, especially adults they don't understand? Yeah. So what I did love about my college experience was that, man, it did teach me how to catch on to what's being communicated. And
which is
to
important.
Take it. Right. And so a lot of people say, well, you chose the wrong degree. Maybe, but now I understand so much more. Yeah. Like the Michael that's sitting in front of you now, you wouldn't be able to have this conversation with Michael at 25.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Michael would never be able to have this in-depth of a conversation and track at a level that would even create anything remotely positive. Yeah. Right. And so I'm not saying everybody needs to go to college, but I'm saying everybody needs to get up to speed, right? And For some of us, we can facilitate that. For others, with patience and grace, like on the east side in communities that are deeply impoverished.
Yeah.
And then for some of us, we have this great skill to be professors and teach it at all levels. I don't know if that'll ever be my thing, but I do know that the education is not just the education within a classroom, it's the education of how are you going to figure it out? How are you going to hack what you didn't get for 10, 15 years, right? Because you do come from a bad foundation.
Right.
So
you guys might hear some weird whirring sound. I have no idea what they're doing right now, but there seems to be drilling going on somewhere in the building.
somebody's working.
Somebody's working around here.
For sure.
So, anyway, well, this is a hopefully the first of a few conversations we have. Today we're, talking about the family, we're talking about family and how vital a role it plays. And I brought up education, because I feel like, a lot of times people, even at a young age, they start thinking, well, I'm going to go be a sports star or I'm going to be a rapper. And so they just give up education to become a rapper. Well, you abandon options then. Because you got to have your second, your third, your fourth option, because you might not be a rapper. You might not be a football player. You know what I mean? And so you got to be able to, am I going to be an engineer? Am I going to go work in, the plumbing trade? The plumbing trade pays a lot of money.
All the trades pay really good money.
Very well, So,
yeah.
So I'm saying is that there's some vital things here, the ability to get your driver's license, to drive a car, those are key items. And we're going to, talk about transportation at a later date. I'm just saying
it's going to be such an epic conversation.
I'm telling you, it really is. There's so many little pieces, though, to be able to. But at its core, though, if we start with the family as the foundation, if we can start getting back to the intact nuclear families, or intact families at least, that will provide a much what's the right word? A much better chance.
A stable society.
Yeah, of a stable society. And here's the thing. When I talk about the East Side, I don't ever expect the East Side to be Overland Park.
No.
I don't want it to be the Overland Park. You know what I mean? No. What I'm saying by that is, like, I'm saying there's a place for starting classes of people to come into our city and begin to climb the economy ladder. You know what I mean? And so we just need to. I can see the East Side becoming more like, what's that? Westport. No,
yep.
Westport or what's the other one right over there? It's another W, I think. The Brookside, Westport. What's the other one right there? Waldo. Yeah, I can see it kind of thriving,
And I think the East Side would look beautiful when you got a whole lot of people doing a whole lot of little things. So you got a lot of people doing their own little part. So you have micro businesses, you have small businesses, you have things that are happening to where you can keep the dollar within your community. Yeah. And if that translates for 10, 20, 30 years, now we're talking.
Well, there's neighborhood economies, too, that are healthy economies, not, selling a gun to a person when you're 16 years old. That we don't want that. That doesn't help.
Doesn't help anybody, but it helps a lot if, small businesses also – they need a little help, like structural wise, politically and stuff, to where we can kind of get our costs back down. We can hire these young kids at an affordable rate, blah, blah, blah. But that is a part of keeping those young communities thriving and getting small business going again. Yes. Like my son right now is taking a gap year in college, and he's just working at the combine, and they're paying him a livable wage. So he can kind of focus on just stacking up some money, getting him a little car. Yeah. He's got the stability of not having to pay rent right now. He's only got about 2 more months of that. But it is one of those things where it's like, that's how a community works. And you got, 100 to 200 people doing it that way within your little ecosystem. Before you know it, that has a big effect.
So my hope, like, if you're from the outside looking in, and you have some money. I don't have a lot of money, but if you have some money, then my hope would be that people would partner with existing people that are already doing good. You know what I mean? Because how can we get behind what you're already doing rather than trying to come in and set up their own establishments. I'm like,
Right.
You don't know the neighborhood. You don't have a network of relationships. You don't have, you don't know the people. I'm just saying, like, what you're saying, these little microeconomies is probably the direction that, and that's what you see in Waldo and Brookside. You see microeconomies,
Yep.
You see a lot of little micro businesses that are thriving,
Yep.
and then also creating these neighborhood economies, like where I can, at 16 years old, walk down the road and mow somebody's yard for $30 or $25 too would be helpful. But a lot of these people, can't even afford that, and that's a problem. You know what I mean? At $25, if you mow 4 yards in one day, you made $100.
You're good.
Good.
And that's work where you can just pop your headphones in and go to town.
14, I was 11 years old. I was in Lee Summit. I was 11 years old. I would walk out in my front yard. I would mow the person across the street from me, the person next door to that person, and the person right next to my house. The 3 houses in that little area, $60 a week.
There you go.
I mean, but those are microeconomies
Yep.
that allow for an economy to exist for young people to, hey, I want to work.
Yeah.
I'm 11.
Yeah. And it's thriving, and it keeps the community safe.
Yeah.
And you can go within your own community and keep
Yeah.
that dollar circling.
Yeah.
And that's what
helpful.
happens. And
And
we'll
it
get
also
into that.
allows those young people to kind of step up, and
Mm-hmm.
begin to realize that if I work, I, make money.
If I take the initiative, I get it.
We should
works.
reward that. That should be rewarded. We should create an environment of healthy neighborhoods that reward that. That's what I was.
I totally
I
agree.
agree with that. So
I
anyway,
totally agree.
well, great first conversation. Thanks, Mike.
I love it. I look forward to coming back.
Yeah,
Appreciate you.
We'll just keep doing this, and I got a lot of notes of what we can talk about. So
Oh man, it's gonna get interesting.
it's gonna get interesting.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, my man.
Bye.